So 65 participants now for the class. So we're starting the surface anatomy of the head and neck. So this class actually has to be taken by Adinarayan because he's got some problem with the voice. He asked to take the class. So with less than 50% of the students attending this class, I think it's really very bad to start the class today. Anyways, so surface anatomy of head and neck. What do you see in the picture which is here beside? You can see there are some markings on the face and in the neck, and these are not tattoos. Okay, rather these are some markings on the skin. So this is a real human; it's not a cadaver. And you can see these markings. And lower down, what you can make out is like if you look through the skin. So what are the bones that are found? So this is your sternum, which you can palpate. And here you can see this. So what is this red line, which is like looking like something creeping on the face of this person? So this is the facial artery. And why is this so tortuous like this? Because in reality, if you've seen in the, you haven't seen the dissection actually head and neck. You make out the facial artery. So facial artery is a branch of your external carotid. So if you can just palpate here, you can feel the pulsations on the face, and that is your facial artery. So that has a tortuous course. The other artery in your body which is having a tortuous course is the splenic artery. So I think all of you have seen that. So this is tortuous because when you turn the face, and there are facial movements and all that. So to prevent any problem with the adequate supply of blood or kinking of it, so it is having a tortuous course. So what you see here, this waving part, this is the facial artery. Then here below the ear, what you can make out is some another marking here. So what is there at this part of your face? So in the gross anatomy, you're taught of a gland which is present here, parotid. So that is a parotid gland, so just beside here near your ear. So this will be representing the location of the parotid gland. And then you can see something coming out of this, going up to here and stopping here. So this is representing the duct of the parotid gland. And then what you will find here, these are all the great vessels of the neck. Like what do you have? You've got your common carotids going up, and that divides into your external and internal carotid arteries. Then you've got a jugular coming down, and you have another vein coming here, that is your external jugular vein. So that's what all here, which you're seeing this red color and the blue. And here in this part, in the neck here region, what you are seeing here, that black color is representing what? This is the hyoid. So recently the midline structures of the neck class is completed. So you must be knowing how a hyoid looks and what is the importance of hyoid and the parts of it. So this bone which you can feel, okay, so that one is the hyoid. And it's got a lesser cornu and a greater cornu, and there's a body. And if you remember back to embryology, so the lesser cornu is from one arch and the greater cornu is from another arch. So just recollect if you remember anything of it. Then something is drawn over here. So this drawing is representing what? What is it that you have? One big cartilage which is very prominent in the males, which is also called as an Adam's apple. So when you look at the throat of a man, you can make out something prominent here. The laryngeal prominence is there. So that represents your thyroid cartilage, the angle of the thyroid cartilage. So this prominence here is that. And here this is all representing your tracheal ring. So if you put these two, I have told in one or two tables. So these are your sternoclavicular joints. You can just put these two fingers here and try to palpate the midline. So you'll feel the rings with your middle finger. So these represent the tracheal rings. So why I've mentioned all this is, so what exactly is surface anatomy? So what you have done till today is you have dissected the regions, you have seen what they are. But when a patient comes, you cannot dissect that patient because by the time you find out the structure, is already dead by then, right? And so you have to be able to see through the skin what are the structures you actually want to visualize. Like if a patient has come with some complaint of swelling in the neck, which is very common. Okay, so the first thing, one of the most common thing is the swelling in the midline of the neck is probably should be coming from one of the important endocrine glands, that is your thyroid gland. So you are not going to, touch his entire neck and then search for thyroid gland. You will not find it. You should know what is the exact location. So normally the thyroid is not palpable. But if it is enlarged, then you will know it. Or else if it is mildly enlarged, you may have to palpate it and try to feel the lobes and all that to see the extent of its enlargement. Okay. So for that, that is one thing. That is the importance of surface anatomy. So you should know exactly how can you trace the location of the thyroid gland. Okay, so that's one thing. And then your parotid here, which you can see. So the parotid gland, because surgeries are done, you should have an approximate idea of where it is. And you're seeing an artery here. So any incisions on the face, you should have an idea of where your facial artery is, and all that. So that I'll tell you in the applied part. So surface anatomy is something which helps you in the routine day-to-day practice, where you have to palpate certain structures for your diagnosis, or you have to do some procedures. Like if you see the patients in hospitalized in ICU, so sometimes what you regularly use, the cannulation, the peripheral veins may not be accessible. So we may have to go for central veins. So central veins are your great veins, which directly take you to the heart. Okay, so you should be able to know where is your internal jugular vein, subclavian vein. And in physiology, they must have told you about your external, the jugular venous pulse. So all that, you will be looking at the patient. You just look at his face, you look at his neck, and you will be able to, know where you're looking at. So to understand that, we need to have an idea about the surface anatomy. Okay, so I just go through the slides. I'll be showing you the markings of how to trace the particular structure, and then one appointment related to it. It's a small class. We'll just finish it off fast. So introduction here. So surface anatomy is a study of anatomical landmarks on the exterior of human body. So that's what I've told you. So anatomical landmarks. Then this has practical implications, applications, and this is important for the medical examination. So when you go to your clinicals, so in the exam they'll ask you to palpate for the thyroid. So you should know where exactly you have to palpate. And both invasive and non-invasive lab procedures. And also to estimate the location of the body parts and knowing the palpation points. So there are certain structures here. So this is what is actually expected, that minimum what you should know. There are quite a number of things which you should know, but these are the minimum. That is the thyroid gland, because one of the most common is the goiter. Then you have the parotid gland and duct. And then the pterion, if you remember the osteology part, norma laterales. Then the carotid and internal jugular vein, which are your important vessels coming from your arch of aorta. Then you've got your subclavian vein, and the external jugular vein for your jugular venous pulse, and the facial artery in the face, and the accessory nerve, which I have told in the cranial nerves as well as in the posterior triangle of neck, it must be covered, going in the roof of that posterior triangle. So today's class we'll be covering these, and I've added in facial nerve and suprameatal triangle, which is important. Let's go to final year part 1. That is the end. So before that, so when I talk of the landmarks of thyroid, parotid, before that, there are some important things in your body which you should be able to know what are they. So I just put this picture here. So look at this. So just touch behind your ear. You can feel the mastoid prominence. Okay, so that is your mastoid bone, the mastoid prominence. Then you can feel your medial end of your clavicle. And then you can palpate your entire clavicle. Okay, so you can see this is all the clavicle here. So if you can palpate these prominent structures in your body, only then you can palpate it on the patient when you go to your clinical year next year, next academic year, and, or it could be next in 2021, I'm not sure about. Okay, so this is your mastoid process, so behind the ear. And then here you can see the most important muscles, which is a key muscle of your neck, you have your sternocleidomastoid. So again, when you are dissecting the gluteal, we heard of this piriformis as one of the, it is the key muscle. So here you've got your sternocleidomastoid. So this is the clavicle, it's been shown here. This is sternal end, this is the clavicular. So this is one of the most important muscles which you can palpate in your body for the surface anatomy of the neck. Okay, so you can see very prominent mastoid process here. And then here, this is the mandible. So this is your body of the mandible, and just go behind, you can palpate the angle of the mandible. Okay, so angle of the mandible, and just go above, that is your ramus of the mandible. Okay, and then just when your ear, so this is your tragus. Okay, this point which is projecting here, this is the tragus. This part. So touching your ear, this one, that is a tragus here, and you can see this part is your lobule. So you are having your earring, the girls. And the male also, you can just touch your lobule. So that is your ear lobule. So these are some of the important points that you should be able to palpate. So angle of the mandible, the then your mastoid process, medial end of the clavicle. Then coming to the midline, you can feel your tracheal rings and the thyroid cartilage more prominent in the middle. So at least this is something that you should know. Okay. And much higher is hyoid. That's not much required, but this sternocleidomastoid is very important. Angle of the mandible, then your lobule, then the tragus here. Okay, and these midline structures, mainly the thyroid cartilage, and just below it, what do you have? You have the cricoid cartilage. And then larynx becomes your trachea. So all the tracheal rings try to palpate your tracheal rings. Okay, so this is the basic that you should know before we enter into the detailed surface anatomy. It's about all this. So again here, so usually we mark on the skin with a skin pencil or a skin marker. So some of the externals, examiners who come for your examinations in clinical year, so they expect you to have the skin pencil and to mark and show them certain structures on the body, like be it the liver or whatever. So you can see all these markings here. So here representing the hyoid, then you can see the thyroid cartilage, and then you've got this cricoid, and then this is the trachea is beginning. And across the trachea, you've got the isthmus, and these two are the lobes of the thyroid gland. So now let us see how we are going to mark them. So first thing is thyroid gland, two structures. One is the isthmus and the other is the lateral lobes. So you can see this is the isthmus. So isthmus is having an upper border here. This is the lower border. Okay, and this is the lateral lobe. So you must know where is this upper border, where is this lower border. So this isthmus is particularly important because this will help you to identify the part of the trachea above this and below this. And this is important for one of the important emergency surgeries, that is a condition called tracheostomy. So some problem is there with taking in of the air, then we have to do an emergency tracheostomy where we can directly open this, create an opening on the trachea. Okay, so that directly the air enters into the lungs. Meanwhile, we can just check out this part, like where the obstruction is or what it is. So tracheostomy is done. So there are different levels. So just for understanding, you know, so high, mid, low, like that it is done, but each is having its own risk. Like basing on the isthmus, above that they prefer a high. Then if they cut the isthmus and there they perform a mid, and below that is low tracheostomy. So you can see when you hear of the word tracheostomy, the procedures which you will be learning in your ENT year. So that time you should understand that this isthmus is important and locating it is what I'll be telling you today. So you have to draw, and here this is the thyroid cartilage. So below the thyroid cartilage, what do you have? This is the cricoid. Okay. So larynx is formed of what? 9 cartilages. So out of which 3 are unpaired and 6 are the paired. That is 3 pairs of cartilage are there. So what are the 3 unpaired cartilages? We have an epiglottis. We've got this large thyroid cartilage, and below that we've got this C-shaped cricoid cartilage. So this is the cricoid cartilage. Okay. So here, this will be our marking. So this laryngeal prominence you should be able to make out, and then the cricoid. And from there, 1 centimeter below that, you draw a line. Okay, that will be the upper border, and then again 1 centimeter below that, or here. See, this is the lower border of cricoid. From here, 1 centimeter you draw here, and then 2 centimeters again down from here. So that thickness of 1 centimeter represents the isthmus. So that's what we have. So the space between the 2 lines marks the isthmus running over the trachea. Then coming to the lateral lobe. So what is this? So these are the lateral lobes. How you have to. So this is your sternocleidomastoids here. Okay. So just where you have your laryngeal prominence, there you will mark 1 and go on to your anterior border of sternocleidomastoids, and that will be 1 mark. And then again a point lateral to the lower border of isthmus. So already you've got your isthmus, so from there you mark 2.5 centimeters away. And then 1 centimeter below the lateral line here, again here. So 2.5 centimeters away here, and just along this, this will be your sternocleidomastoid. So like that you will just mark and you will join the lines, and you will have the location of the thyroid gland. So that is it, how you are going to mark it. See, these are the usually what we get, the enlarged gland. So this can be because of some endocrine dysfunction, or it could be of a tumor. Anything. The tumor can be not dangerous one, or it can be a dangerous one. So thyroid swellings. So between your stomach, so this is where you just push the sternocleidomastoids, and here you can catch hold of your thyroid swelling. And you can see this is not exactly midline because maybe one lobe has got involved and the other could be comparatively less involved. And then here, see, you can see this is like again the see-through image. You can make out the cartilages here, thyroid cartilage, the cricoid. You can make out the rings here. Then you can see the isthmus. These are the lateral lobes. And just above the isthmus, you can make out there's some an instrument there. That's a tracheostomy tube. So isthmus of thyroid is usually retracted. And you can see how this is the tracheostomy. So this is for your idea of the importance of knowing the mark of isthmus, especially in a procedure called as tracheostomy. So the next one is your parotid gland. So parotid gland again here. So for this you can make out. So this is your mastoid process. This is the angle of the mandible here. So this lies below external acoustic. So this is your external acoustic meatus. You can see the gland here. And this is your masseter muscle. And then this is a sternocleidomastoid. This is the ear lobule. This is the tragus. And you can see that these are all processes, extensions of your facial process. And then you can see this is the parotid duct. And then parotid duct abruptly goes down and it pierces the buccinator and then opens into your oral cavity. So here you can see it lies below the external acoustic meatus. So this is the external acoustic meatus and occupies interval between the ramus of the mandible and the mastoid process with sternocleidomastoid. So this is what? This is your ramus of the mandible. This is the mastoid process and the attachment of sternocleidomastoid. So this region is occupied by your parotid gland. And then these are all the markings. So normal laterals, if you remember your zygomatic arch, you touch this point here, that's your zygomatic bone. And then what you find here is your zygomatic arch. Okay, so this part is your zygomatic arch here. So superior border is along the lower margin of this posterior 2/3 of zygomatic arch. So this is your zygomatic arch. So here upper border they have drawn a line. Then posterior border runs in front of external acoustic meatus and mastoid process and anteborder sternocleidomastoid. So this is what external acoustic meatus here. Okay, then go up to your mastoid process. Then this you can feel your sternocleidomastoid. So here is the upper border that you're going to draw. Then anterior border spans over the masseter muscle. So I have shown you here. So you've got a masseter and then it just goes on to the masseter muscle. So you can mark out. So you have to palpate in the patient the zygomatic arch, okay, and then just draw a line above. Then here below this, behind the ramus of the mandible, external acoustic meatus up to mastoid, and this region is where the parotid gland is supposed to be located. Then coming to the duct, so you can see this part here. So this is the aloe of the nose, and then this is your lateral angle of the lip, mouth. You can see here and here. And this part is your tragus. So a line extending from the external acoustic meatus to a point midway between the aloe of the nose and the lateral angle of the mouth. I hope this statement is very much clear. So this part, external acoustic meatus, and you can see it's going midway between these two. You draw a line and this middle 1/3. So they're making it into 3 parts. So the mid 1/3, mid part is the location of the parotid, because here is all what? You've got a parotid gland. Then the duct. And why it is not up to here? Because it will go deep, pierce the buccinate and open into your oral cavity. Okay, because parotid is one of your major salivary glands, and stimulation of that gland produces saliva. And that has to go towards your oral cavity, into the vestibule it opens. So this line is not required. Duct does not come up to here. Okay, it's just stopping in this particular region. So the middle 1/3 of this line is the parotid. It's not like all the lines you draw on the face belong to that particular structure. So we just marked it and we picked out the exact location, that is the middle 1/3 of that particular line. So pierces buccinator and opens at the upper second molar. I hope you know the names of your teeth. You've got incisors, canines, premolars and molars, and you know how many teeth you have, provided they have not been broken by your parents. So this is the parotid. See, zygomatic arch, it's like acoustic meatus going up to the mastoid and in front of your sternocleidomastoid. Then from here, this middle part is your parotid arch. And this picture is much better. So between this is the ala of the nose, this is the angle of the mouth, and the midpoint may be selecting one point. Then coming to pterion. So the next one is the pterion. And again, in normal lateralis, you must have seen the pterion. So that's where 4 bones, you can see this is a head-shaped part. So what are all the bones that are forming here? So this is your frontal bone part here. Okay, you can see the parietal, the temporal, and the sphenoid. This is what? This is your parietal bones, which is over here. This is your parietal bone. So you've got 2 parietal bones here, and these are your frontals, and here you've got your temporals, and then much deeper you've got your sphenoid, which is like if you have seen the interior of the skull, and the sides also. So this is a sphenoid. So all the 4 these are coming together at one point. So when so many structures are coming together, definitely that will be a weak point. So pterion is one such point, and it is very much important because just deep to that pterion, you've got your middle meningeal artery. If you remember middle meningeal artery, anything, the branches of any artery, I mean, that's for you to recollect. So this is one, you can see the relation here. This pterion is important. Now you can see how they're palpating, 2 fingers above and 1 here behind the arch. So they can roughly, so this is what, here you can, this is frontal bone, this is zygomatic bone. I told you this is your zygomatic. So process, frontal process zygomatic bone and zygomatic process of frontal bone together. You can see there's a suture line here, telling that these 2 bones are fusing here. So from this point behind you go, okay? And the zygomatic arch above that. So 3.5 centimeters above and 4 centimeters above this. So that should take you to the pterion. I think I've told right, yeah, 3.5 behind, this is a fronto-zygomatic suture. And 4 centimeters above your zygomatic arch. So this is your zygomatic arch. And this is a rough palpation from just putting 2 fingers and 1 finger behind the prominent part. And what is the importance of this? So quite common, you'll be seeing this road traffic accidents. You will be hearing of road traffic accidents and all. So whenever there is a fracture of your skull, then do you think there will be a bleed? Definitely there will be a bleed. So we've got different kind of hemorrhages. Okay, so there is an extradural hemorrhage, subdural, intracranial, like that. So whatever bleed happens within this particular cranial cavity, it does have an effect on the brain. Because brain is most important and it is all in a closed space in a cranial cavity. So any other extra accumulation of things, whether it is extra CSF, as in hydrocephalus, or extra blood because of hemorrhage, or extra mass because of a tumor, definitely you will find that there is some change in the patient because that is affecting the highest center of your brain. So we are related mostly with consciousness. So usually patients lose their consciousness in the traumas. So we need to know what kind of hemorrhage it is. So one kind of hemorrhage is extradural hemorrhage. So if you remember the dural folds or dural sinuses that they cover. So you've got your skull, which is having the inner and outer table, and just deep to it you have got the dura mater of your meninges. So what are the meninges? They are the coverings of the brain, and you've got 3. The pia, which is the closest to the brain tissue. Then you've got a network, a spiderweb kind of arachnoid matter, and then you've got a much tougher one that is called as your dura mater. So dura mater is having 2 layers in case of your cranial cavity. One is an endosteal layer, endo-osteal layer. That means it is inner to the bone. The other is a meningeal layer, which is more close to the rest of the meninges. So between these 2 are where your dural venous sinuses are. So when I talk of extradural hemorrhage, so what should be the location? Outside the endosteal layer and within the skull. That is the bony part. So that's your location of extradural hemorrhage. So that is one kind of hemorrhage. So the patient generally, I'll just show you a picture of that, how it looks. Yeah. You can see, so this is the brain tissue here. This is a skull. This is this endosteal layer. And you can see the blood, which is clot that has got collected. So this blood origin is what? It's your middle meningeal artery. Okay. So middle meningeal artery, you can see it's going to span like this. So usually the traumas at this part of it involves your middle meningeal artery, which rupture and lead to the collection of blood. Okay, and these form a hematoma or a clot. And definitely this has an effect on the brain tissue, and especially, and here you can see this is one trauma. They've just cut open. This is done by a neurosurgeon. You can make out the points and they break the bone this way. The meninges here, and they have found out the clot. Okay, so we have to remove the clot. And I'll just tell you one important good point about extradural hemorrhages, a classical thing called lucid interval. So patient has this accident, and then he's usually what do you look for when some accident happens? You look whether the patient is conscious or no. Okay, after a trauma. So here the patient is conscious, and you start worrying only when he's unconscious. If he's conscious, we find he's fine and everything. So this is one a cheating kind of hemorrhage. This is a condition called lucid interval where the patient is fine for some hours, and slowly he starts deteriorating and becomes unconscious. That is called lucid interval. Okay. So the most important thing that should be done is this particular clot has to be drained. So usually we approach through the period because that is the weakest point. You can drill their butthole and then remove that bleach, and then patient is fine. And if you are habituated to seeing any kind of series related to the medical practice or anything, so usually the youngsters or the house surgeons, that particular phase of that in the series. So this extradural hemorrhage will be one part of the series, like how they save their own friend from an extradural hemorrhage doing a butthole, outside the hospital. So that's one big story, and I hope you understood the important what I actually wanted. So I've just written it. You can just go through it. Okay. So the pterion, which is the head shape here, where all the four bones are coming together. This is related to your middle meningeal artery. So this pterion is important because in certain procedures, you can reach it by knowing its surface marking. And this middle meningeal arteries are the cause of your extradural hemorrhages. So arterial with extradural hemorrhages are usually arterial bleeds. Then coming to common carotid, so these are the arteries here. So here you can see medial end of the clavicle here. So at a point at the medial end of the clavicle. So if you can feel your medial end of the clavicle, then a point at the level of upper border of thyroid cartilage. So this is your thyroid cartilage, so along the upper border. And which muscle is here? You've got your sternocleidomastoid. So along the sternocleidomastoid. So below is your medial end of the clavicle, and then at the level of your thyroid cartilage. So that's representing your common carotid artery. So just join these 2 points, we'll get this. And what is the importance of common carotid? So you palpating. So there are so many pulsations which you have to take, and the other is common carotid. So usually you've got around 8 sites where you've got to palpate for the pulses in your case sheet when you go to the next clinical year. So usually we'll be doing it bilateral, this radials and all that we'll be checking. But one thing you should not do is bilateral palpation of common carotid, because you just kill him by stimulating what? You've got a carotid body, carotid sinuses. You remember which is baroreceptor, which is chemoreceptor. So you will be stimulating your carotid, okay, and that will cause a collapse of the patient, and you will yourself will get scared. So palpating for the pulsations, and then usually when somebody falls down, the immediate, it's like instead of checking, if somebody is like fainting in the dissection hall, we'll be checking your the radiance, because we know the person is conscious and is responding. But if somebody just falls down and is not responding, we have to check for the common carotid. So usually for that you should know where your common carotid is. And also hemorrhage, because your carotids, external carotid artery and all that's going to supply to your scalp. So scalp, again, head traumas and all that, so scalp injuries are there, and a lot of bleed. So sometimes you may have to compress that, so you should know where it is to stop the bleed. And cervical vertebrae class is over, so you must be knowing what is this anterior tubercle of C6. So against that, we have to press, and we are going to stop the bleed. This is all the applied part. Then come to the jugular veins. So internal jugular vein, okay, and you've got your subclavian vein. So internal jugular vein is bringing the blood from your brain, and then you've got your subclavian veins which are bringing the blood from your upper limbs. So these two together, they form what? Brachiocephalic veins. And both brachiocephalic veins become what? Superior vena cava. And superior vena cava opens into the right atrium. So these are called as your central veins, because sometimes when the peripheral veins are not accessible for passing any catheter or sending some fluids or for medicines, then usually in the ICU setup, the anesthetists are called in to give a central line. That is, the central veins are used, your internal jugular and subclavian vein, and the catheterization to go into your right atrium also. So that time also used. So internal jugular vein and subclavian vein you should know. So again here, point on the lobule, a point on the lobule of the ear behind the angle. So feel your angle of the mandible. Behind that you've got a lobule, so there one point, and a point on the sternal end of the clavicle. So this is the sternal end of clavicle, and just join these two. And that's your location of your internal jugular. Then coming to subclavian vein. See this part here? So you have to know the sternal end part here, then this clavicle, and then below it. You just mark it down like this. So this is your subclavian artery, and just beneath the subclavian artery is where you have your subclavian vein. So you see below the subclavian artery, for your subclavian artery. So central vein catheterization is a procedure. This is the subclavian vein has been catheterized, and here your internal jugular. So external jugular vein, this physiology, you are very good at physiology, so you must be knowing your jugular venous pulse, how to see. Again here, external jugular vein, see a point, so this is your angle of the mandible, and then at the middle of the clavicle. So you just join them, you get your external jugular vein. So when you're patient, you're checking JVP, so you know that reclining semi-reclined position, and then you have to look where that particular angle of the mandible is, and this, and that's your region where you should check for your external jugular. So external jugular vein. We come to the facial artery interface. So this is again important here. So this is your body of the mandible, angle of the mandible here. This is your angles, this is the inner angle of the eye. So along the base of the mandible, at the anteroinferior angle of masseter. So here you've got a masseter, so just at that angle. This is one point that you'll mark. Then again, lateral to the angle of the mouth. So about half an inch around. You'll just mark here. Then angle of the eye. You can see angle of the eye. And then a tortuous line, you just mark. So along the base of the mandible, anteroinferior to masseter. Then here, lateral to your angle of the mouth. And then along the inner angle of the eye. And a tortuous push. That is the facial artery. And facial vein will just be here behind the facial artery. So the facial artery is only tortuous. Okay? And what is the importance of knowing the facial artery? So one is the pulsations. Okay, you have to feel your facial artery pulsations at times in some procedures, and especially the plastic surgeons and cosmetic surgeons, whether it is for a cosmetic purpose or some medical related issue. So there are things that are called fillers which they inject into the face to give it a better look for the face. Okay, so especially in old age. Okay, so this fillers are given here and here to make the person look young. At that time, so when fillers are injected, so which is the most important thing, you have your artery. So you have to be careful about it. So one is we'll be checking the pulsations, and then as I told you, the fillers. So anywhere, even if you're giving a local anesthesia also, when you're anesthetizing your scalp to give a skin suture, you have to be careful that the needle is not going into the artery. Because if you inject any kind of substance into the artery when it should not go into the artery, then definitely it will form an embolus. So embolus is like a foreign body or whatever. It's just going through your blood vessels, and you know blood vessels give rise to many branches which become thinner as they reach up to the tissue level. So obviously this tends to travel this embolus, and it will block some of the smaller branches, because of which there will be a decreased blood supply to that tissue, and there can be a tissue loss. So there's every chance that anything, whether it can be air, it can be some lipid based medication, which can form an embolus, and because if it goes up your ophthalmic artery, then it can also block the vision, the central artery of the retina if it's involved. So blindness. That's why you should know the location of the arteries. Well, anyways, when we are injecting something, we try to pull it back and check if the blood gets back into the syringe, then we have to remove the needle. We are in the wrong position. So that's, anyways, we're going to check that. Then coming to the accessory nerve. The accessory nerve here, tragus. So I told you this is your tragus. Then point at the tip of the transverse process of atlas. So this is that. Okay, 4 points are marked. The first one is on the tragus. Then a tip of the transverse. So atlas is already completed cervical vertebrae, so you should know how to palpate it. So this is found between, you got your tip of mastoid process, and this is your angle of the mandible. So between these two, so here is what you get the mastoid process tip. Here is where you feel your angle, and between these two is marked B. Then you can see sternocleidomastoid mastoid trapezius. So along the posterior border here and along this trapezius. So this is like almost, if you make it 3 parts, 1/3 and 2/3 on sternocleidomastoid, and this is above the clavicle, the trapezius. So you just mark them, that will be your accessory nerve. So I just added the facial nerve here, which is actually not given in the competencies for you. So facial nerve, you can see here 2 points. So one is here, this is your mastoid process, and then here this is the lobule above that. So this facial nerve, the extracranial course, so once it exits from your styloid mastoid foramen, the extracranial course of facial nerve begins. Okay, and this is particularly important because I have told you in facial nerves, if you are doing a procedure in a child, okay, in less than 2 years old, any post-auricular incision if it is given, now we are having the mastoid, the adult is having a mastoid and it's going behind it. So this is a protection part. But in an infant, the mastoid process does not develop. So it's still in the starting stage of development. So any incision directly, a little deeper it goes, it can go directly to the facial. So that's one thing. Then coming to the last one, that is a suprameatal triangle. So here, this is again your zygomatic one. So a line above the zygomatic arch, we'll draw a line here. Then tangential to the posterior border. So these are external acoustic meatus. So behind that, we have to draw one line and a perpendicular line. So you can see. So above the zygomatic arch and behind this and this. This is your suprameatal triangle. So if you remember the middle ear class, so middle ear is connected with your mastoid process, and mastoid process is having air cells. So any infection of the middle ear, if you're performing a surgery on it to clear the infection, you also have to go to the mastoid process, or else there is still some infection left out there in the mastoid process. So sometimes there are chances that your mastoid air cells may be infected and there can be some abscess. So we may have to drain it. So the best way to reach it, the mastoid antrum or the largest air cell, is we go through the suprameatal triangle. So here, this is the parts. So Symbaconcha. So if you can feel your ear and you can locate the Symbaconcha. So this lies over the suprameatal triangle, and suprameatal triangle overlies the lateral wall of the mastoid. And about 1.5 to 2 centimeter deep, if you drill and go, you are there into your mastoid. You will reach up to the mastoid antrum. So that's about the Symbaconcha here. See, external acoustic meatus. So here one line, and then tangential, and then here. So this is a McEwan's triangle or suprameatal triangle. And this, if you see in the ear auricle, this is that location. And the importance of it, you will be reaching up to the so we'll be reaching up to the suprameatal triangle to the mastoid antrum. So this can be felt as a triangular depression to the Symbaconcha. So the parts of the auricle is what you should know. And then to gain access to the mastoid antrum during the surgical debridement of the mastoid abscess. So this is all about the surface anatomy of the head and neck. So we have covered the thyroid gland, parotid gland, so 2 glands, and then important vessels, that is both arteries and the veins, and some nerves and some bony points, that is stereo and your suprameatal triangle. So just go through the PowerPoint and try to just understand about the surface anatomy. Okay, so tomorrow I'll be taking radiological anatomy, and that finishes the gross related part of this head and neck.